All right, guys, I think I'm going to go ahead and start. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Appreciate it. My name is Joe Glenn, first of all. And so this is actually the second presentation on the Macomb campus for the college theme, third overall when we count in Canton. Okay, so obviously our theme this year is who can, we can, the will to overcome. So some of you know me. For those who don't, I actually teach history out here as well as American government. So I'm going to be kind of looking through the lens of history when we look at this theme. But I think it's really important to remember that all of the classes that you guys take out here are all connected. Okay, so that's the purpose of this theme, to kind of highlight the similarities among these classes. All right, so essentially the title of my presentation is Looking Back to Push Forward. Basically, how can we look at past historical events to make sense of the craziness of everyday life today? Right? How can we look at the lessons of what happened then to kind of find keys and answers to what we can do now? Okay? So this is actually, as you can see, right, a picture of Red Cross volunteers during the 1918 influenza pandemic. Okay? As many of you know by now, right, 50 million people died in that pandemic worldwide. 675,000 people died in the United States during that pandemic. Unfortunately, we just crossed that number with the COVID-19 pandemic, so it's the deadliest disease in U.S. history now. So the focus of my presentation is not going to be about the 1918 influenza pandemic, but I wanted to kind of start with it because I think obviously our theme is kind of a reflection on everything we're going through right now, right? Who can, we can, right? There's all these challenges. I guess the point is we have been through challenges before, right? This was a terrible period in our history, right after World War I, right? So already a cataclysmic event, right? And then we had to deal with this. So many people died. There was so much heartbreak, but the country endured, right? So if we look back at certain incidents, we can see that there is hope, right? We can kind of move forward if we choose to, okay? So I'd like to kind of begin with this basic fact, right? Life is difficult, right? Life is hard. It's not easy, right? When we think about what's happening in maybe our personal life with family or friends or relationships, or we think about what's going on with work. Maybe we have to work 2 or 3 jobs, right, just to pay the bills, right? When we think about what's going on, maybe you're having difficulty in classes that you're taking right now. Life is difficult. And when you add that, the already fact that life is hard, when you add that to what we've all been going through the last 18 months, sometimes it can seem overwhelming, right? When we talk about isolation, when we talk about quarantine, when we talk about all of these things that have completely upended society, okay? So I guess the point is life can just throw all kinds of things at us. It's up to us to decide if we want to overcome, right? If we have the will to overcome, if we have the will to, push forward, essentially. So history, right, kind of the lens that I'm looking through, history has shown us that in our country, right, we've been through so many difficult time periods in our history, right? There's been so many things that have happened, so many times where it just looks so dreadful, right? Where despair could just consume you, right? When I was thinking about this presentation, I actually was thinking back to what Mr. Maher said a couple weeks ago in his presentation, right? Sometimes it can be very difficult to be optimistic about things, but if we look back at past events, we can see that if you push, if you try, things can change. Might not happen overnight, might not happen in your lifetime even, but things can get better as a society, okay? So let's talk about a few of the periods in U.S. history that have been difficult, right? Obviously, the country was torn apart in the 1850s into the 1860s with the Civil War, right? People were at loggerheads, right? The issue of slavery completely dominated the political landscape in the United States. The South left to hold on to that institution. Even after the Civil War, right? We saw the Jim Crow South take effect. We saw essentially laws put in place to separate people based on the color of one's skin, okay? So it would have been so easy. Think how easy it would have been for all of the people in that time period who were being discriminated against, who were being essentially ignored. Think how easy it would have been for them to give up, right? When we look at our lives right now, like, man, things are difficult. Think about those people. Think about what those people had to go through. It would have been easy just to sit down and say, I'm done, right? I'm done fighting for these things. I don't see anything happening. We just fought a war, right? And we're still, essentially, in almost the same position. So again, would have been easy, but they didn't quit, right? They continued to protest. People continued to rise up, okay? Think about the Great Depression, right? 1929, when the stock market crashed, October of 1929. The next year, 25% unemployment in this country. It would have been really easy for everyone to just give up. It would have been really easy to give in to that despair. But people didn't. People kept pushing forward. Government helped, right? Government programs essentially were created at like a rapid pace that really kind of brought people hope. But still, life was difficult. It would have been so easy. So history shows us, right? If we choose to, we can rise above struggles. We can rise above challenges. But we have to decide to, right? We have to make the effort to essentially say, yeah, it might not happen right now, it might not happen tomorrow, but it can happen, right? It can essentially get better, okay? So what we can do, we can use the lessons of history to kind of look at our own lives, our own struggles, what we're all going through right now, because face it, we got a lot of problems in this country, right? We have environmental concerns, we have systemic racism, we have labor issues, we have the disappearing of the middle class. We have a lot of things that we need to work on, right? So there's a lot of things that can kind of lead us to a path of despair. But if we look at all these other things that have happened, those people didn't quit. Those people didn't give up, so why should we, right? We need to keep pushing forward too. So one of the things that I think really kind of keeps us down in a way is doubt, right? We cannot let doubt win, right? If we let doubt creep in, if we just say, oh, can't do it, then we've already lost, right? The game is already over before it's begun. If we decide that doubt, if we decide that there's no way that we can push forward. I mean, think about our country, for instance, right? When it was founded, our country, more than anything else, was born with an idea, right? Representative democracy, government of the people, by the people, for the people. Essentially, that idea, we think about it today as like, yeah, okay, well, who cares, democracy. Well, back then, it was new, right? It was revolutionary, right? A lot of people doubted that that was even possible. Even after somehow the United States became the United States and won the war against Great Britain, people doubted that the government could exist. People thought, oh, after a year or two, we'll go to a king, we'll go back to basically what happened before, right? So if everyone would have believed in that concept of doubt, then the United States government probably wouldn't have become what it became. Now, there is one important caveat. Right? When we talk about these ideas, when we talk about democracy, when we talk about all of these things, obviously there were contradictions at that time, and yet there still are, right? Democracy wasn't open to everybody in 1800. It wasn't open to everybody in 1900. Still today, there are laws that are being put in place to harm democracy, okay? So we have to basically keep that idea fresh. We have to keep renewing that idea. We can't let doubt creep in and say, oh, democracy isn't possible anymore in the United States, right? Because if we do that, we're in trouble. So some still, even today, doubt that, again, our democracy can sustain on both sides of the political aisle, right? You have Democrats and Republicans who doubt that democracy is working, okay? What we need to do, again, we need to kind of sharpen our lens to a certain extent and keep in mind that democracy, our way of life, basically is fragile, right? To a certain extent, if we kind of give in to doubt, if we give in to misinformation, right, then we're in trouble. Let me give you just a few examples without getting too political, because I don't want to do that here. But we do know some facts, right? Again, about 695,000 Americans have died of COVID-19. If you would have told me 18 months ago that 695,000 people are going to die from this, I wouldn't have believed you, right? I mean, that's just a staggering number that I think sometimes we are numb to, right? But now there's something we can do about it, right? We all wear the masks, and we can all get a vaccine, but yet there is still doubt about the effectiveness of a vaccine that can and does save lives, okay? Why is there doubt? Misinformation spreads very, very rapidly, even in the face of science, even in the face of facts, okay? So if we give in to that doubt, right, if we keep letting that misinformation spread, then the disease will still spread. But if we as a people choose to look at the science, listen to the professionals, then we do have a chance to get out of this mess, okay? So don't let doubt win, right? Don't let you be consumed with doubt. I think so often too now, guys, people doubt each other, right? We doubt our institutions, we doubt our friends, we doubt our neighbors, right? we need, I think, to kind of get over that to a certain extent. I think we can, right? But unless we do that, then we're going to keep going in that cycle. But history shows us that we can do it. But again, we got to choose to do it. We have to decide, we have to make a concerted effort to say, you know what, let's look at facts, let's look at objective opinion, and let's go. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and advance the slide here and talk about something that annoys people, I think, about history and also about just making things work in general. As you guys know, progress is slow, right? It takes time, right? Think about like all the legislative agenda ideas that get circulated around Congress. We hear about the same things time and time again, whether it be climate change reform, immigration reform, doing something about healthcare. We hear about this so often, but rarely it seems does something actually happen, okay? But if we stop talking about these things, nothing will happen. Let me give you a few examples. I'm not going to bore you too much with the details of these Supreme Court cases, but I do want to give you a little context, okay? So, some of you have probably heard of the case Plessy v. Ferguson. It is one of the worst Supreme Court decisions in all of U.S. history, okay? Basically what happened was there was an individual named Homer Plessy. He was a mixed-race citizen in New Orleans, okay, in 1892. At that point in 1892, they had separate railroad cars for black people and white people. He said, you know what? You can call it separate but equal, but it's not equal. So he boarded a railroad car for white people. Basically, he was not allowed to board the railroad car, and he was kicked off of it. So he sued. He said, this violates essentially equal protection laws under the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Okay? So he took his case to Louisiana Supreme Court. They didn't agree with him. They basically tossed it out. He took it to the U.S. Supreme Court. They tossed it out. So essentially, they ruled against Plessy. Now, you might be wondering, okay, separate incident in New Orleans. How can that be applied to the segregated South? Essentially, what the Supreme Court ruled was that, yes, you can have separate but equal facilities. Of course, they weren't equal, okay? So it didn't just apply to railroad cars. It applied to restaurants. It applied to, entertainment venues. It applied to schools, okay? So when we talk about education in the United States, progress was so slow. After 1896, okay, schools in the South were now legally segregated. It wasn't until 1954 with Brown v. Board of Education that the Supreme Court essentially overturned Plessy v. Ferguson, where they said separate but equal is inherently unequal, meaning that you have to integrate schools. You have to integrate other facilities as well, okay? So the point that I'm trying to make is, Homer Plessy, he didn't live to see 1954, right? A lot of people who were alive in 1896 after this terrible decision did not live to see 1954. But did they stop fighting against this ruling? Did they stop fighting for true equality? Did they stop fighting for integration? No, they didn't. Think if they did, right? This wouldn't have happened, right? There would have been no Brown v. Board of Education. There would have been no overturning this case, okay? So progress is slow. Look at that. I mean, it's 58 years, right? But it still happened. So if we, today in 2021, if we just basically stare out into the abyss and say, man, nothing's ever going to change, right? They all say the same things all the time. They all talk about the same issues. If we kind of take that attitude, then in 2070, or whatever year we're talking about, things won't change for the better, right? We have to, as a society, force that change for us, but also for future generations. And getting real quickly back to this education example, there's still continuing challenges today, right? We know that the law of the land is you cannot segregate schools, but think of all of the public schools in this country that are still de facto segregated because of where people live. We know that education, basically where you go to public school, is determined by where you live. We know that neighborhoods are still segregated today. And we also know that schools don't have the same amount of funding because of tax dollars, okay? So even though we had this decision, doesn't mean that we're done. It doesn't mean that we're done fighting for true equality in education. As we all know, education now more than ever is so important to getting a head start, right? Those jobs maybe 60, 70 years ago that you could have without a college degree, a lot of those jobs are gone, right? So a lot of the jobs today are tech jobs, healthcare jobs, other jobs that require education. So we need to make sure that our kids, right, in junior high and high school and grade school, right, we need to make sure they have a level playing field, right? So there's still work to do, all right? So I'm going to close with, what can we do? Let's bring it back home to us, right? We talk about these big ideas, we talk about, legislation and all that. Chances are we're not going to be involved in writing the legislation, right? So what can we do? I think number one, we need to take advantage of what we have here, right? Take advantage of, essentially, you guys all are taking advantage today with the college theme series. Take advantage of the classes you're taking, right? Even the classes, and again, Mr. Mocker mentioned this a couple weeks ago, even the classes that you might not particularly find that relevant to your major, right? Still take advantage of them, right? Because it produces a well-rounded knowledge base for you, where you can take that knowledge, then you can make a coherent argument to someone who says something that you might not agree with, right? So again, take advantage of your opportunities, essentially. If you have an opportunity, take advantage of it, right? Also, I would say, be as informed as possible, all right? Try to kind of go out and look for relevant information that is fact-based checked, that is, produced in scientific thought. Just look for information, because one thing I would argue is we can't solve a problem if we don't know anything about the problem, right? The only way to tackle these big, important, complicated issues is to kind of understand what they are in the first place. And also, admit that there is a problem, right? If we bury our head in the sand and say, oh, I don't think that's an issue, I don't think that's a problem, then again, we've lost from the beginning, okay? So again, history teaches us, right, that we've been through all of these challenges, that we've been through hard times. Not everybody, unfortunately, makes it to the other side. But because of the sacrifices that people make, we can maybe get to the other side, right? So essentially, look at the past to kind of unlock the key to the present and to the future, so future generations can kind of bear some of the fruit, all right? So thank you guys. Anybody have any questions about anything? Anybody have any thoughts, any comments about what we can do, what we can do to kind of get past some of these challenges that we face? Yes. Love that.
Okay, so I think you touched on some really important issues here, Joe. But for me personally,
yes,
the one that hits the sharpest nerve has to do with the sort of challenges to democracy itself.
Right.
Because this, of course, is the common thread that's supposed to bind all of us together under a common sort of cause and purpose. We have an agreed upon sort of, process of how to make decisions. So to what extent do you think the voter suppression tactics that are going on today, do we not see this because we lack the historical context to understand things like poll taxes and literacy tests, especially given the fact that there's no academic research that there's any systematic voter fraud whatsoever?
Right. Yeah, I mean, very, very good question, and this has been boggling my mind as well. If we look at our past, if we look at our history, if we look at these poll taxes, literacy tests, we know these tricks have been used before. It might not be a poll tax anymore, might not be a literacy test, it might be essentially cutting voting hours, right? It might be saying you can't have a soda or a water when you're outside waiting in line to vote, right? Things like that. Things that basically limit the ability to vote. So it might not be the same, but it kind of is the same, right? It's suppression. These tactics, state after state, Texas, Georgia, Florida's trying to do these things, right? It chips away at our democracy. Whether people see it or not, it is still happening. So I think the only way to kind of get past that is to talk about it, right? It needs to be on the news every day. It needs to kind of be out there. And also we need federal legislation to essentially prevent these states from essentially doing that. So yeah, our democracy, not just from misinformation, but also from clear legislative agendas and states, is being threatened. And it's a dire threat, because if we don't agree on a basic concept such as democracy, then we can't really do any of these big things, right? If we don't agree on the basic foundation of what we stand for, right? So I think we can still obviously come out the other side, but we need to, I think a lot of people need to wake up and kind of see that problem that is so clearly in our face. It's a great question, I'm glad you asked. Anybody else have any questions, any thoughts about anything? All right, well if not, thank you so much for coming everybody, and remember, our next presentation, Macomb, with Bob Zellman, Tuesday, October 19th. So we hope to see everybody back for that. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.